Northeast Nigeria and Somalia are on the verge of famine. We'll have reports from both countries. The U.S. Secretary of State declares U.S.-Russia relations are at rock bottom. And a fleet of ambulances is filling the gap in Somalia's public services. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. We begin tonight in East Africa, where thousands of Somalis affected by severe drought and a potential famine in the countryside are continuing to stream into the country's main cities looking for food and clean water, drinking water. Now, viewers, Abdulaziz Osman reports from Mogadishu that conditions for these internally displaced people are worsening by the day.
Hungry, malnourished children and families are pouring into squalid camps like this one outside Mogadishu. Among the IDPs are parents whose children starved to death before their eyes as they walked for days seeking food. Hawa Aden holds her 2-year-old son, who is acutely malnourished. She has lost 2 of her 5 children already to starvation. Now, her son has measles, and she cannot get any medicine or food for him.
Since we came here 3 days ago, we are hungry. We have not been given anything.
Sitting in another small hut, Faduma Nuro was miserable. Nuro told VOA she lost 2 children to drought. One died of starvation before they reached the camp. The other died here.
We faced hunger and thirst for 10 days as we walked from a village in the lower Shabelle region. I lost 1 child on my way, and I lost the 2nd kid in this camp.
Malakbul Ibrahim Ali, Nuro's elderly uncle, can barely stand. He said the drought killed 5 young children from the family and all the livestock they had.
For 15 days, I walked and sat, and that's how I got here.
This camp and others nearby are receiving thousands of families every day, and conditions are dire. The United Nations says the risk of death from starvation in this Horn of Africa nation is growing as severe drought continues. Abdulaziz Osman, VOA News, Mogadishu.
Well, now, across the continent in West Africa, the situation is also dire. Approximately 44,000 people are severely malnourished and facing famine in northeast Nigeria. The prolonged humanitarian crisis in the wake of the Boko Haram insurgency has had a devastating impact on food and nutrition in the area, particularly in Borno and Adamawa states. Africa 54's Esther Gidoyuwat reports.
Here in Dikwa, Borno State, Baba Gana Mai Abba made a living as a driver before Boko Haram militants looted his belongings and burned down his house.
Boko Haram chased me from my home here, and I fled to a nearby village. When I came back, I found that they had burned my house with everything in it.
A father of 12, Abba collected firewood for sale in nearby bushes to feed his family before he registered for handouts with the World Food Programme. Boko Haram's 7-year insurgence to create an Islamic State in northeast Nigeria has uprooted an estimated 1.8 million people. The World Food Programme Director of Emergencies, Denise Brown, says coordinating aid in the region is a major challenge.
We're pushing back on famine-like conditions in Borno State, where we have close to 2 million people who require immediate food assistance. Our major challenge right now across the 4 countries, northeastern Nigeria, Chad, Cameroon, and Niger, the first challenge is funding. In the next 4 to 6 weeks in northeastern Nigeria, we will completely run out of funds.
Last month, the United Nations Security Council members visited the Lake Chad Basin region and adopted a resolution condemning all terrorist attacks and abuses of human rights by Boko Haram and Islamic State. Britain's ambassador to the UN, Matthew Rycroft, says the resolution calls upon countries in the West African region to ramp up their response to the humanitarian crisis.
We must all act now if famine is to be avoided. That means addressing the root causes of the crisis by addressing economic inequalities, countering violent extremism, and empowering women.
Nigeria's ambassador to the UN, Anthony Bosa, says his country is determined to exterminate terrorism from inside its borders.
Despite the enormous challenges occasioned by the terrorist activities of Boko Haram, the government of Nigeria remains resolute to defeating terrorism in all its ramifications.
Neighboring Chad is hosting around 345,000 Nigerian refugees in desperate need of food assistance. The World Food Programme says some 4.7 million people face acute hunger in 3 states, and the number is expected to rise to 5.2 million by June, and the situation is likely to persist until October. Esther Githu-Ewart, VOA News, Washington.
Well, Nigerian officials are in talks with Boko Haram in an effort to win the release of the remaining captive Chibok girls. This, according to President Muhammadu Buhari. Friday marks the 3rd anniversary of the kidnapping of 276 schoolgirls by Islamic terror group. The kidnapping is one of the most infamous of Boko Haram's insurgency, now in its 8th year. More than 20 girls were released last October in a deal brokered by the International Red Cross. Others have escaped or been rescued, but 195 are believed to be still in captivity. Buhari's government has repeatedly promised to secure the release of all the Chibok girls. Well, a German prosecutor said Thursday investigators have not found evidence that a man detained in connection with the bombing of a football team bus in Dortmund took part in the attack. But the statement says they are still seeking an arrest warrant for the man identified as Abdul Basit A. And on allegations he is a member of the Islamic State terror group. Now, a series of explosions rocked the team's bus Tuesday, injuring Dortmund player Mark Batra and a policeman, and forcing the team to postpone that evening's game against Monaco. According to German prosecutors, a note left at the scene of the bombing suggests the attack could have been carried out by the Muslim extremists.
The motive for this attack remains unclear. At the crime scene, 3 identical letters of confession were found, according to which an Islamist background to the attack seems possible. The letters include demands for the disengagement of Tornado fighter jets and, I quote, the closing of Ramstein Air Base.
Well, now the German fighter jets referred to in the note are based in Turkey. A game the team was supposed to play that night against Monaco was delayed to Wednesday when Monaco defeated Dortmund 3-2. The prosecutors say they believe Abdul Basit A led a unit of 10 militants involved in kidnapping, smuggling, extortion and killings in his home country before crossing into Turkey in 2015 and into Germany early last year. Now, after hours of meetings in Moscow Wednesday between U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Russia and the U.S. seemed only to reinforce existing divisions between the two nations. VOA's Daniel Schaff reports from Moscow that the sides continued their exchange of harsh words over Syria and responsibility for the recent nerve gas attack that killed civilians.
After a last-minute closed meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson held a joint press briefing with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Tillerson came away from the Kremlin with a gloomy assessment of relations.
The current state of U.S.-Russia relations is at a low point. There is a low level of trust between our two countries. The world's 2 foremost nuclear powers cannot have this kind of relationship.
In an interview with Russia's Mir TV, Putin agreed, saying relations with the U.S. have become worse since President Donald Trump took office.
It is possible to say that the level of trust on a working level, especially on the military level, has not improved, but rather has deteriorated.
Tension spiked over allegations Syria last week used deadly chemical weapons on civilians, and the U.S. responded with airstrikes on a Syrian airbase. Lavrov called the U.S. airstrikes illegal and described U.S. behavior as unpredictable. But there was agreement to investigate the chemical weapons attack in Syria. Russia blamed Syrian rebels for the poison gas release that killed more than 80 people, and it vetoed a UN Security Council resolution condemning Damascus.
We saw the readiness of our U.S. colleagues to support such an investigation, and we count on the United Nations and the OPCW immediately putting to use the powers they have.
Tillerson said the reign of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's family is coming to an end, and he urged Moscow to withdraw its support for Assad, a move analysts say is unlikely.
It's about the diminishing of Russian prestige and influence, so they won't accept it unless they have very important reasons to do so.
Russia says it will reinstate a Syrian air safety agreement it suspended with the U.S. over its airstrikes, but only if Washington promises not to target Assad's forces, which Moscow claims are only targeting terrorists. Analysts say the lack of coordination in the crowded Syrian skies raises the risk of a bigger conflict.
But what's important now is to avoid all kind of direct military confrontation, and God forbid really any military collisions between the Russian airspace forces and the United States in Syria.
The bigger question remains, given recent incidents, is there any potential for better relations between the two superpowers? Daniel Sheriff, VOA News, Moscow.
Well, Russia flexed its veto power of the UN on Wednesday to protect Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad from international condemnation for last week's deadly chemical weapons attack. In a vote of 10 in favor, 2 against and 3 abstentions, Moscow blocked the measure put forward by Britain, France and the United States. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, says Russia is on the wrong side of the brutality against the Syrian people.
The United States takes no pleasure in seeing Russia isolated again on the Security Council. We want to work with Russia to advance a political process for Syria. We want Russia to use its influence over the Assad regime to stop the madness and the cruelty we see every day on the ground.
Draft resolution sought to condemn the gas attack and strengthen an international investigation into what happened. The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump believes the Assad regime launched the April 4th gas attack on the town of Khan Sheikhoun from the Shayrat airfield. Now, the United States launched a targeted missile attack against the airfield 2 days later in response. As the federal investigation into whether members of President Donald Trump's campaign colluded with Russia to influence the 2016 presidential election continues, the FBI has revealed that it obtained a secret court order last year to monitor the communications of Carter Page, an advisor to then-presidential candidate Donald Trump, according to the Washington Post. Citing unnamed law enforcement and other U.S. officials, the Post says the FBI and Justice Department were able to secure a visa warrant after convincing a judge there was probable cause that Page was acting as an agent of a foreign power. In this case, Russia, hired by the Trump campaign as a foreign policy advisor in March 2016. Page, a former investment banker, has praised Russian President Vladimir Putin and criticized U.S. sanctions against Russia. But during an interview with CNN on Wednesday, Page denied working for the Russians. Trump officials insist any suggestion they colluded with Moscow is false and politically motivated, and Moscow has denied any allegations of collusion with U.S. officials. Now, at a White House meeting with NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg Wednesday, President Donald Trump reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to the Western alliance he once called obsolete. Stoltenberg called NATO a bedrock of security in today's volatile world. VOA's Zlatin Sahok reports.
At a joint news conference with Stoltenberg, Trump praised the 68-year history of the military alliance.
The NATO alliance has been the bulwark of international peace and security.
Trump pledged to work with members to resolve threats to global security, including the unrest in eastern Ukraine and what he called the disaster currently taking place in Syria.
This includes upgrading NATO to focus on today's most pressing security and all of its challenges, including migration and terrorism.
As he has in the past, Trump called on NATO members to meet their financial obligations to contribute 2% of their GDP to defense.
If other countries pay their fair share instead of relying on the United States to make up the difference, we will all be much more secure and our partnership will be made that much stronger.
Stoltenberg said fair burden sharing among member nations has been his top priority since taking office in 2014, and that there has been improvement.
In 2016, for the first time in many years, we saw an increase in defense spending across European allies and Canada. A real increase of 3.8%, or $10 billion more for our defense.
Stoltenberg said meeting membership obligations is especially important now that the world is a more dangerous place to live. He also said he agreed with Trump that the alliance must redouble its efforts in fighting global terrorism. Trump and other NATO heads of state are to meet next month in Brussels. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. And also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, filling the gap in Somalia public services. We'll have the details. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat.
The vintage sound of music from a record is very popular in the Czech Republic, and that love of vinyl is prompting high demand for turntables to play them on. Fabricating all the parts and assembling them piece by piece, SCV Livotel made 32,000 turntables in 2009. In 2016, they made 125,000 players. The distributor is Heinz Lichtenegger, the director of Austria's Project Audio Systems, who says the future is bright for analog music. He says playing a record is a relaxing way to slow down in the world.
You don't click for the next song, yeah? You have to listen the whole record, yeah?
These handcrafted turntables can cost $200,000 to $10,000. Lichtenegger's distribution has doubled in size, and the factory exports turntables to Britain, Australia, and the U.S.
But in 10 years from today, there will be only streaming, and a very good portion, about 20% of the revenue of the music will be analog.
For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
Welcome back. Now, a fleet of ambulances are being used to fill the gap in Somalia's public services. Africa 54's health correspondent Lina Mudu has the details.
After he watched the neighbors injured by bomb blasts bleed to death on the way to hospital, Somali dentist Abdi Kadir Adem spent all of his savings on a battered van to ferry wounded people to hospital. 10 years later, his single van has grown into a fleet of second-hand ambulances, Amin ambulances. The vans are instantly recognized on the battle-scarred streets of Mogadishu.
The first ambulance I paid, I remember the only money I was having, 4,200 I paid. And well, my family was telling me to stop this job because they are saying it was quite risky and you will be definitely in risk. So I didn't. I decided to start the free ambulance service. I paid the first money, which was 4,200, the only money I was having at that time.
The 10 ambulances are imported second-hand from Dubai for around $5,000 each. They have basic first aid equipment, a stretcher, and a bench for paramedics or a second victim. The service costs around $12,000 per month in gas, salaries, and supplies, but operating an ambulance service can be dangerous work.
There had been heavy fighting that day when one of our ambulance drivers went to help the injured people at Hawadak district. When he was picking up people and the artillery gunfire hit the ambulance, he lost his life.
Somalia is currently facing severe drought and hunger. The country has been mired in conflict since 1991. Nairobi-based think tank Saharan Research says at least 723 people were killed and nearly 1,200 injured in bomb attacks in Somalia last year. Most are civilians. In 2008, Ethiopian troops battling Islamists obliterated an Amin ambulance, its driver and a patient with a tank shell. Last February, ambulance crews narrowly escaped a secondary blast that erupted moments after they transported patients from a blast to the hospital.
Yeah, I'm in ambulance is the first, because it is the only free ambulance service in Somalia, whole Somalia, especially in Mogadishu. And we are not dealing only the explosions, but also we deal with pregnant women. We took from the home to the hospital. We took the children who's in diarrhea, the people who are in need to the hospitals. We took them from their home to the hospital. We deal every type of emergency.
International aid agencies such as the World Health Organization, the Red Cross, have helped sometimes. But the vast majority of cash comes from Somalis themselves. Aden also spends his earnings as one of Somalia's few foreign-trained dentists.
My dream is to reach whole Somalia, everywhere in Somalia, to bring an ambulance, plus helicopter ambulance. They're coming soon, inshallah.
For Somalis, ambulance crews are homegrown heroes. Linor Mudu, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, African high school students pitch ideas at U.S. competition. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Senegal, about 20 people were killed in a fire at a Muslim spiritual retreat in Medina Gounass village. In Niger, authorities shut down the campus of the main public university in Niamey. That's following protests by students over poor education and studying conditions. South Sudanese refugees stream into Uganda after fleeing the town of Pajok, which pro-government forces attacked on Monday. Finally, in Somalia, the military celebrates 57 years since it was formed in Mogadishu, with a ceremony attended by government officials and the African Union Mission. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
How do you see the world?
I see countries in turmoil.
I see our planet changing.
I see people at peace.
No matter how you see the world, you'll get an unbiased and uncensored view of it on Voice of America. On television, radio, online, and mobile. In more than 40 languages all day, every day. Millions of people tune us in.
How do I see the world? On Voice of America.
Welcome back. Now, African students are in the United States to pitch their entrepreneurship ideas in a competition that will result in training and funding for their business ventures. To tell us more about it, I'm joined by Edith Anyango, a 15-year-old student who is part of the Startup Africa. Edith, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Student, it takes me back to my best days. It's when I was in school. Yes. First, so share with us, what's the name of your school?
St. Peter's Suneka Secondary School.
Yeah.
It's a mixed school, day boarding.
Oh, yeah. So boys and girls together, right?
Yes.
Now, you're all the way here from Suneka, which is close to my village, and you're in the United States. Tell us about how you ended up here.
We heard that there was a team, Startup Africa, called Startup Africa.
Yeah.
And we saw one of the challenges in our community.
Yeah.
We came up with an idea and we introduced it in the internet. Yeah. And on the 7th of, was it February? 18th of February, we competed in a national competition in Maria Soti, Eldoret. There were 17 teams. We became second position.
Second position out of 17.
Yeah. And the first position were 2 teams from different schools.
First, you did so well. Yes. Now, tell me, what was the problem you identified in your community with which you came up with an idea?
Actually, this problem is in most of the countries like Somalia, this was hunger. Yeah, the challenges which our communities underwent, like drought, lack of food. And we came up with an idea.
Tell me about it.
Actually, we came up with a flour that is mixed with baobab fruits found in the arid areas, which contains a nutritive value, which adds the sour taste. And actually, these baobab fruits, we asked, we did a survey that baobab has nutrients, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, vitamin D. So we came up with this idea of mixing it with flour to reduce the use of citric acid and citric acid,
So that it becomes like a food that can be preserved and given to people, especially in
Kenya, people love porridge, ugali, and we came up with this idea, like the Turkana, they're facing hunger. So when you take that mixed baobab fruits and the flour, that's why we say it's of high nutritive value.
Okay, so it will help them.
Nutrients.
Now, very quickly, if you win, what is the top prize if you get this?
In the internationals, first position, $10,000.
$10,000,
Second position, $7,500. Third position, $5,000.
So do you do this, are you going to do this project as a group or eventually it's an individual?
It's a group.
Okay, so you work together as a group.
And
I know the baobab tree, there's a big tree, it produces very nice fruits, and they make, sometimes they make some really nice sweets out of it. A mabuyu, they call it in Kenya. And so when is the actual competition?
Actually we had competed.
So you have competed? So what's the stake? What are the stakes? Have they announced the winners?
Yeah, they announced, but you are not winners.
Okay. Anyway, all the best. You made it to the United States. You really did so well getting up to here. And the idea is still great. Whether you get the money or not, you'll still develop it. Thanks a lot, Edith. Very nice that you could join us today. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Just sit there. That is Miss Anyango, who's a student who joined who came to the U.S. through the Startup Africa organization. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch our show on our website. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A cannon used to be a common military weapon.
Loose cannon.
So, are Anna and Jonathan talking about an old battle?
Hey, I'm looking for someone to host a political event tomorrow night. Can your friend Sylvia help out?
Sylvia? She's a loose cannon. You never know what she's going to say. She could easily